Let's do it.
We'll introduce ourselves first, maybe? Sure. Okay. You want us to introduce ourselves?
Sure.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hi guys. I'm Amy Metaboard, Child Life Manager. And I'm Sarah Anderson, a Child Life Specialist in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit. And we're here because we want to introduce this topic of emotional safety to you guys. The organization that governs Child Life, it's called the Association of Child Life Professionals, has put out this whole initiative about emotional safety. And the idea really is to take some of the things that we do already in child life, but really spread them throughout pediatric healthcare and bring some awareness to this term emotional safety, that while we talk about physical safety all the time in healthcare, we can also really make sure that we're attending to the emotional safety of children and families. So the definition that they gave emotional safety is an intentional multidisciplinary practice to promote resiliency, healing, and trust for pediatric patients and their families during their medical experiences. And those are a lot of big words. So to me, if I talk about like what does that mean, how do we do that? I think we do it by making sure that kids and families are feeling heard and valued, and that they're feeling like we're really taking their individual needs into account as we care for them. I would say we do an outstanding job already of doing this here. So I think Sarah and I are really trying to think about what kinds of tools and what kinds of ideas can we put in place that can help our entire team do an even better job. Because what we know is that when we talk to kids and families, as good as we are here, there still are lots of times when there's, especially with parents, I think a parent who just doesn't quite feel safe enough to say what they need to say, or to really express to us what's bothering them. We talked to a couple parents who 3 years later just like had like a whole hour's worth of things to talk about from when their kids were hospitalized. Like some really strong parents, but who said, there just were moments when I didn't feel like I was really valued, or that I was really being heard. And I worried about how to advocate for my child and do it in the right way so that I didn't say something wrong, and I didn't, and I wasn't, and I wanted to be sure I understood correctly. So that's kind of what we've been thinking about. I think that on the side of the children, I think we do a pretty darn good job making sure that kids are heard and that we're helping them understand. Though of course there are moments when we can do better. But we kind of started thinking about a list of questions that maybe, some of these questions came from the parents, that maybe we could kind of help everybody to step back and think about and take a moment to ask families. I think Sarah's gonna tell you about some of those questions.
Yes. So our ideas and our plans have just kind of morphed and evolved into looking towards, is there just like a cluster of questions that we could be asking families as we sit down with them or as we spend time with them about how we can best support them. So that's really just the first question. How can we best support you and your child today? Or for the child, how can we best support you today? And really looking at making sure that they're able to have their voices heard, that they're able to be validated, that they feel like they're part of the decision-making process. And then the second question is, what are your concerns? I think that can be a question that can be quite loaded, because it might be the concern in the moment, or it might be the overall concern of the hospitalization, or it might be a childhood concern that families are dealing with. But I think it's important for us that when we're interacting with a family, we're taking into account that family dynamic, which I think we do very well already, and that we're really looking at what trauma have they experienced previously? Have there been some acute childhood experiences that they've encountered that have really just kind of have a basic underlying irritation or underlying distrust, or is there something that's happening that we can support them through? But really finding out about that takes a lot of conversation to figure out how we can best address their concerns. And then the next question is, what works for you? And this kind of came from an idea of if there's something that they've done previously, that's great information for us to know. Because if it's something that was a coping plan or something that was successful, those are things we want to focus on. If there's something that did not go well, then that's something we want to make sure we're not repeating so that it can be a positive experience for the patient and the family. And then next, what can I do for you? And sometimes that's just as simple as getting a glass of water, which I think we all are often running to the ice machine to get families ice water, or coffee. And then also just trying to figure out in that moment what that family needs. And a lot of it is reading the room, but also a question of what do you need right now? Like, what is it that we can do for you right now? What can we do for you? What can you do for your child in this moment that's going to make this as positive as possible? I think that as we look at how we already function as a children's center, I think we do so much of this so well. I think the key word for me is that we're intentional about it, because the more intention we put into it, the more it just becomes part of our dialogue, it becomes part of our awareness, it just becomes part of our practice. And I know we're working so hard at just recovering from this pandemic, where we all have experienced a lot of just traumatizing experience outside of the hospital, and then our families are coming into the hospital. And we want to make sure that as we're moving more towards family-centered care, getting back to family-centered care now that families, parents and children can be together in the hospital setting, that we are promoting that continued bonding for families and also making it as positive as possible during a healthcare crisis or a medical situation. So emotional safety, I think, is something that we do so well already, but now that there's this, a language around it, I think definitely our intention is going to go.
And I think sometimes even, like when there's a situation where something isn't going well, or somebody's looking really stressed or frustrated, I think sometimes it's our first response is, oh, I'm gonna get out of the room, or, oh, I don't wanna talk very much. But maybe that's the time to really sit down and say, can you tell me a little bit about what's concerning you right now? Is there something that you really want me to know that would help me take care of you? I know Rhonda had a situation recently with a mom where you did just that. Like, I think you knew that, like, there was something she wasn't saying.
Yes,
and
it was clear. Yes.
And it really wasn't a big deal, but
no,
but
she
you
just.
had to really stop her and
I
say,
did.
Tell me what's happening.
She was very stressed, and I could tell, and I fixed all the things that she asked me to fix, but then I could tell that there was just something else. And when I asked her, like, is there anything that I can do for you right now? Like, is there anything that would, like, make your day better? And she was like, I would just really appreciate a Diet Coke. I was like, okay, like, we can make this happen. And it was like, and it literally, when I came back in with a Diet Coke, she was just, her whole demeanor had completely changed. She was just so grateful.
Right. But then you also told me that she didn't want the oxygen tubing, I think, on the back of the child's head, and just hadn't told you.
Yeah, so he had, I think, like an NG and oxygen, and it had just been retaped, and we were trying to get him situated in her arms and, all these wires and all that kind of stuff. But what she hadn't said, and she hadn't spoken up, was that we had made his oxygen go to the back of his head because it seemed like there was so much going on in the front. And when we moved his oxygen to the back, what we didn't realize is that when he lays down on his head, she doesn't like it because he moves his head so much. And so I could tell, I was like, is this how you want it? Is everything how? And then she finally, but I had to kind of like coax her a little bit to get her to open up. And then she finally opened up and just said, I really don't want it on the back of his head because then he rubs and I'm afraid he's going to get a wound. And so then we just popped it over the top of his head. And then she was like, thank you. And then I got her a Diet Coke and she was like a whole new mama.
Amazing.
Yeah. But I really, she wasn't gonna like advocate for herself or her child. Like she really was just like, it's fine, it's fine. Like, but I could tell in that, like, when I say it's fine to my husband, he's like, uh-oh, it's not really fine. And that's what it felt like, you know?
Yeah.
Same thing was like, oh, you're saying it's fine, but I can tell it's not really fine. So, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think we probably all see examples of this every day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've never really used the term emotional safety, but I feel like it just elevates it a little bit because we talk about safety so much.
And I like the part that you mentioned about it being intentional. It's like we do practice a lot of this, but I think that there's something nice about us going into the room with the intention of asking, not just asking the questions like, do you need anything as you're backing out the door, but the whole actually standing in the room and saying like, what can I bring for you? Like what would make your night easier, your day better, and really making it meaningful and intentional. It takes the same amount of time, but it's just the wording of the question, I think.
Sometimes I like to ask, like, is there anything you're wondering about today? Because I think often, like, kids and families have so many questions in their head that they don't often feel like any of us have time for them to ask us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that guy was just in here and he said this thing, and like, why did he say that? I don't understand what that meant. What did he mean that he's going to suture me?
Yeah, I think emotionally safe language is part of this as well, as how are we conveying to patients and families what the plan is in a way that they understand. I think we're very comfortable with our own medical language, like you're going to move to the floor, we're going to flush your IV. There are things that we say on a regular basis that can cause alarm for children, because moving to the floor means something. Exactly, yeah, and flushing.
We flush potties.
Exactly, yeah. So there's just ways that we can even think about how we're saying these words as we're interacting and being intentional about our language in order to best support patients and families also.
I think we always think about that language for kids, but really, a lot of family members have no idea what we're talking about. Yeah. I mean, I went to the ED with my husband this weekend, and I was continually translating for him. Like, they're acting like this because, you know, oh yeah.
Okay, well,
Perfect.
Thank you for your
There we
time.
go.
Thank you, guys.
Well, again, we'll send you this too, but just